Hatched. Editor. Atlas Studios. Roy seemed to have a never-ending dream in the darkness and haze. The dream seemed bizarre and ridiculous, and the reason why the word seemed was used to describe it was because the dreamland dissipated immediately when a wave of throbbing came over him. Roy woke up. The very moment he awakened, he could not recall anything about his dream. After waking, Roy felt something amiss about his environment. He felt his entire body shrank into a ball and confined in a small space with air that reeked of rancid body fluid, which was even a little sticky. Roy could not figure anything out since there was no light around him. Out of instinctive fear, he subconsciously opened his mouth to shout. However, he was almost choked to death by the liquid he inhaled. Roy flailed his hands around blindly in panic as though he were drowning. In the end, his hands touched something that seemed to be a layer of wall. He reached out and touched it. It felt thin and warm. It was too late to think too much. Roy subconsciously banged his fist on this layer of wall, only to realize that something was wrong. His strength seemed to be much lower, and even his body was not what it was supposed to be. Fortunately, that layer of wall finally broke after he consecutively banged his fist against it. He heard a crack, and a fissure appeared in the wall. Faint light came through. It worked. Roy's spirit was immediately rejuvenated, and he continued smashing. After Roy managed to send a piece of the wall flying, the viscous liquid around him finally found an outlet. It rushed out through the gap, and the air from the outside world flowed in, allowing Roy to be finally satisfied with his instinctive breathing. He took a long deep breath, and the fullness in his lungs gave him the feeling of gratification that he was finally saved. However, Roy was taken aback by the strange sounds he made after exhaling. He did not know if it was because his vocal cords had not been in use for a long time, but the sound he made was like this. Tweet tilde tilde. Shit, did I turn into a moaning monster? Roy mocked himself before quickly peeling off the rest of the cracked wall, and making the gap larger. He grabbed the edge and drilled his body out of the gap. The first thing Roy did after he pushed himself out was to raise his head and look at the sky. He was stunned. Purple moon. After staring at it for quite some time, Roy was finally certain that the round thing exuding a purplish glow and hanging in the sky was a moon. He then lowered his head in panic and looked at the place from where he had just emerged. What the FCK? It's really an egg. Roy had had a bad hunch when he freed himself from the crack a moment ago. He felt despondent, as though he would never love again after realizing that he really emerged from a black egg. He was actually hatched from an egg. Hello everyone. Henceforth, please call me Hatched, Roy the Hatched. After making light of the desperate situation he was in, Roy stretched out both hands. As he thought, what should have been a pair of human hands with calluses was now a pair of baby-sized palms. His skin was not only strangely dark red, but there were also some strange black lines on it. He had sharp nails on them, and even his feet were claw-like. He touched his face. His eyes, nose, and mouth were still there, but there seemed to be two bulges on his forehead. Is this a pair of horns? He touched behind and found a black arrow-shaped tail. Damn it, what kind of monster have I become? It would be great if I had a mirror. Roy suddenly thought of something. His expression changed as he lowered his head to look at his crotch. He finally heaved a long sigh of relief. My precious, although it's a little chilly without pants, all's well if you're still there. Lucky, my gender didn't change. Otherwise, it would have been crazy. Putting aside my memory of being a straight human male for the past 20-odd years, judging from how I hatched from an egg, if I really became a female, wouldn't that mean I would have to pop eggs out when I breed in the future? That scene is simply... He shook his head, chasing away this creepy imagery out of his mind. Roy started sorting out his memories since he was still confused. There was nothing special about Roy's previous life. He grew up as a carefree youth in a peaceful age. After graduating from university, he worked hard in the city just to pay off that expensive mortgage. His favorite hobbies were playing games, reading novels and comics, and watching anime. He would occasionally barbecue with his friends if his economic situation allowed, and he would also take the opportunity to vent to his circle of friends late at night. He was rather good at finding joy in adversity. His goal in life had been for that house of nearly 400 square meters to work its magic in seducing a woman to take on and repay the mortgage with him. If you thought about it this way, Roy was actually quite ordinary. The only thing that was commendable about him would probably be the last few pieces of memory he had. Roy seemed to remember a mother and her child. When he was crossing the zebra crossing at the crossroad, a child was walking and playing a game on his mobile phone at the same time. His mother was pulling his arm, lecturing him, and they failed to pay attention to the traffic. Right at this moment, a car sped through the red light. Its driver might have been drunk or something. Roy saw it and had the chance to dodge, but that mother and son did not realize it. He had no idea what he was thinking about, but he grew hot, stopped in his tracks, and pushed that pair away. Then he felt a huge impact and his body swirling into the sky. His memory stopped there, and Roy knew that he probably died. Was it necessary to ponder about why he appeared in this bizarre place and became a bizarre creature? Needless to say, he was reborn. The young people of today would be embarrassed to chat with others if they did not know terms such as transmigrate and rebirth. Roy had no regrets losing his life saving them. Who would have the time to ponder in the moment of saving people's lives? Humans led ordinary lives for many years, and one glorious moment was enough. His only regret was his parents. They had to be grieving. Roy became sad when his thoughts turned to this. After mourning for his previous life for some time, Roy sighed. After paying tribute, he adjusted his mind and raised his head to survey the environment. What he saw made him a little dazed. He seemed to be on a beach. However, unlike the blue sky and white clouds in his impression, the sand on this beach was blackish red, and the particles were very large, like burning coals that had water poured on them. Not only did they emit green smoke, but they also caused the surrounding air to be full of soot. The farther away from the sea, the more the red sand. On the other hand, the nearer the sea, the more the black sand. This sand seemed to be formed of fresh magma, with hot and humid seeming to be the greatest characteristics of this beach. Surprisingly, other than the one Roy was born out of, there were tens of thousands of eggs on this beach. These eggs varied in size, but they were at least the size of ostrich eggs. Their colors were different as well, having black, red, and even purple and silver. The only similarity was that the warm and humid condition of this silent beach gave these eggs a suitable environment to incubate. It seems to be a natural hatchery. So, where did these eggs come from? Roy turned his head around and saw waves washing the beach at its edge. The color of the seawater felt very uncomfortable under the moonlight. It was blood red. The eggs of different sizes floated on this blood red seawater and were pushed onto the beach with the help of the tide. This strange scene allowed Roy to finally understand how he had appeared on the beach. The intensity of each wave was not regular. They were large and small at times, causing some eggs to be pushed further onto the beach while some were scattered around the edge. On the beach closer to the seawater washed over the magma sand, causing its temperature to drop quickly. In contrast, the sand farther away could retain heat for a longer period, leading to differences in the speed of the eggs hatching. Roy could see many eggs moving and shaking in the higher temperature region in front of him, while the lower temperature region behind him was dead silent. Luck played a vital yet cruel role in this survival of the fittest here. In fact, the eggs pushed to the beach already had better luck. Roy saw some eggs collide and shatter before they could land, causing the liquid in these shattered eggs to flow into the sea. Needless to say, these were the ones with real bad luck. The creatures inside did not even have the chance to hatch. Roy could not help but rejoice. Fortunately, he was in an egg that successfully landed on shore. If not, he would have probably been among one of those with rotten luck. This ocean, this beach, and the bizarre scene in front of him were frantically brewing question marks in Roy's mind. Where the hell did I arrive at? This repressive and cruel environment gave Roy a bad feeling. Also, what should I do next? It's been 20 to 30 minutes since I hatched. Roy had a basic understanding of the environment from his observations, but he was at a loss about what to do next. Right at this moment, a loud grunt came from his stomach. This sound came from Roy himself. He was hungry, crazily famished. What is the most important in the 21st century? Cheat. Editor. Atlas Studios. This feeling of hunger was so sudden and violent that it threw Roy off guard. A feeling of emptiness like a black hole came from his stomach, stimulating Roy's mouth to secrete a lot of saliva. These droplets of saliva dripped out and fell onto the ground, corroding it and causing it to emit green smoke. Roy did not give a damn about this currently. He could not resist his body's physical instinct. He was so hungry that he turned his head to stare at the eggshell that he just hatched from. This broken, ugly, and black eggshell was exuding an "I'm delicious" smell, announcing its existence to Roy. I can eat, right? Definitely so, right? Don't some creatures devour their eggshells after hatching? Roy really could not think of anything else that could relieve his hunger from the surroundings, so he could not care less as he grabbed a piece of the eggshell, stuffed it into his mouth, and chomped on it vigorously. Kacha kacha. Unexpectedly, Roy realized that the eggshell was not that unpalatable. It was like chewing on crispy rice. He did not know if it was because of the magma beach, but it actually tasted as though it was baked. It was delicious. The eggshell that he swallowed finally relieved some of the hunger in his stomach. However, before he could rejoice, a strange memory suddenly appeared in his mind, stunning him. This memory turned out to be a kind of inheritance from the eggshell. It was short and only told him two things. One was regarding his identity, and the other was about his name. Roy was stunned because he found out from the inheritance that his identity was a demon. This was really too difficult to accept. Roy did not even think toward the direction of a demon when he realized his body's strange condition earlier. He was still guessing if he had rebirth into some kind of monster like Godzilla, which would have been frustrating but also quite novel. Now, however, the situation was worse than he imagined. Shit, did they get it wrong? I died saving lives. Even if the merit of saving lives isn't enough to let me go to heaven, become a cute, chubby angel holding a small bow and arrow, and shoot at pretty ladies, I should have at least been granted another chance at life. Why did I turn into a little demon? Did I fall into hell instead of making it to heaven? He cursed inwardly but was unable to do anything. Roy had no power to correct this error even if something had gone wrong. Bakrancha Marier Lictoren Stanless Lundisha, Ramos Osiris. A lengthy name appeared in Roy's mind as he devoured the eggshell. This had to be his true demon name if he had not guessed wrongly. According to the memory, every little demon hatched from an egg would obtain a name after devouring their eggshell. This name was the true demon name, and it was a mark imprinted on the demon's soul that must not be disclosed to anyone. If there was need, they could generally take a segment of their name from the whole string. The reason why the true demon name had to be kept a secret was that once it became known to someone else, that person could bring indelible damage to the demon through special means. The disclosure of the true demon name was an immense threat to their survival. It was a common weakness among all demons. This was like using a computer to create a document. The program would automatically mark the generated file with a page number. Once you knew the full name of a file, you would be able to locate the file accurately, even if there were millions of files. The true name of a demon was the mark that the creator gave them. It could accurately locate the soul of the demon. Now that he understood this point, Roy would not mention his true name anymore. Moreover, only a crazy person would read such a long name, and he would still use the name he had in his previous life. However, this incident also put Roy on alert. Him being a demon was an irrefutable fact that could not be changed once he had his true demon name. The first thing he had to do in an unknown environment and an unknown world was to adapt to this transformation. He must not get to know this world with his human thinking. Otherwise, he might die without knowing how if he was not careful. Only those who had died once would know how lucky it was to be reborn. Who knew if he would be given another chance if he were to die again? Therefore, whether as a human or a demon, it was most important for him to treasure his own life. The surface area of the eggshell was not big, and Roy devoured the whole thing in no time. Just when he swallowed the last piece of eggshell and felt a slight satisfaction in his stomach, a voice appeared in his mind again. Custom-made Demon King system has activated. Roy was shocked. What? Before he could react, an illusory image appeared in his sight. What appeared in front of Roy was a panel. In the middle of the panel was a strange eye. It blinked at Roy and made a clicking sound. The sound immediately reminded Roy of the one his mobile phone made when he took a picture with it. After blinking, the eye disappeared immediately. What replaced it was a picture in the blank space right in the middle of the panel. The picture had a squatting little demon with dark red skin and pointy ears. In addition to the pair of just exposed pointed horns, he had a bunch of messy black fetal hair. He looked unexpectedly cute. Is this what I look like now? Roy stared at this selfie with wide eyes. Alright, putting aside whether or not he was cute, Roy noticed that there were some options at the top of the panel. The first item was Beautify. He stretched his hand to touch it, and a series of tools popped up on the left side of the panel. These tools were graffiti pen, erasing pen, coloring pen, and some other special brushes. Other than the Beautify function, there were also color, special effects, text, collage, filter, 3D, save, and so on. Roy felt uneasy after seeing these functions. He searched all corners of the panel and finally discovered, shit. What Demon King system is this? Why does it look like the combination of a bunch of software like PS, 3D Max, and A? Being reborn with a cheat is all nice and cool, but what the hell is with these strange abilities? At the same time, an attribute panel appeared beside Roy's demon selfie. Name: Roy. Race: demon. Bloodline: at least 4 different kinds. Demon name: Bakrontia Marier Stanless Lundisha, Ramos Osiris. Form: newborn premature. Hierarchy: bottom of the low rank. Attribute: dark. Strength: 14. Speed: 12. Magic energy: 9. Activity: 13. Loaded materials: none. Skills: none. Talent ability 1. Soul Peer. Explanation: after living beings die, you can easily discover the location of their souls. Talent ability 2. Demon blood. Explanation: the demon race is bloodthirsty and warlike. It is very easy for you to go berserk whenever you enter combat. In addition, demon blood gives you better affinity with negative energies. Talent ability 3. Soul devouring addiction. Explanation: it is in a demon's nature to devour and play with souls. It refers to the pleasure and ecstasy brought about through devouring souls. Items: none. Number of souls in possession: 0. Evaluation: the complexity of your bloodline limits the upper limit of your potential. You did not even obtain the talent power of your bloodline, and your premature birth makes you the weakest existence among those at the same level. Cannon fodder, no hope, farewell. After seeing this evaluation from the system, Roy had no idea what to say. Roy had a feeling of novelty when he accepted that he was reborn as a little demon, but he did not expect to be so weak, making it difficult for even him to accept it. Premature. I'm actually a premature baby. No wonder those demon eggs around me were dead silent. It is heaven's will to destroy me for breaking out first. His evaluation by the system might have said that he had no hope, but Roy still wanted to struggle. And first, he had to figure out how to use this system. Fortunately, although the system looked complex, using it was relatively simple. It did not take long before Roy finally figured out how to use this system. On the first page with Roy's selfie was his body displaying all of his current statuses. What Roy wanted to do was to upgrade himself by drawing and defining the material with special effects, colors, and so on before finally using collage to integrate it onto his body. However, a special item was necessary to complete these operations: souls. For example, if Roy wanted to give himself a pair of demon wings, he would first need to use the graffiti pen to draw these wings and then use the text function to define that it was a pair of demon wings that could be used to fly. He could also use the special effects function if he wanted to add on special abilities such as flames or frost to the wings. Finally, after consuming an equivalent amount of souls to save, Roy would immediately grow a pair of wings exactly the same as his design. Throughout this entire progress, things like the materials for drawing and special effects did not cause any consumption, and he could use them as much as he wanted. However, the final step, saving, required the consumption of souls. The more detailed the drawing, the more complex the definition, the more gorgeous the special effects, the more the quality and quantity of souls required during save. Simply put, this so-called custom-made Demon King system was actually one of Asia's big 4 evils, PS technology. You could draw anything as long as you could imagine it and then create it through an exchange of equivalent souls. No wonder this system is named the custom-made Demon King system. Drawing was not a problem for Roy. His previous job before being reborn was in art design. The problem was the acquisition of souls. This beginning is a little difficult. Where should I obtain my first soul? The moonlight from the purple moon began to shine brighter as Roy pondered. The radiation became stronger, like a signal. The large number of demon eggs on the beach began hatching one after another. The little demons within began breaking their eggshells and drilling out. The silent beach suddenly became lively with all kinds of weird growls. Demon Law. Editor: Atlas Studios. Demon eggs started hatching in batches, as though their time had arrived. How to put it, this scene was like the one in Jurassic Park when the dinosaurs hatched. Little demons broke out of their eggs, and the entire beach suddenly became a birthplace of monsters. The little demons hatched one after another, and their forms were all different. Some of them were humanoid like Roy, while some had beast forms with their 4 limbs on the ground. Other than that, there were insect-like demons with many legs. Some of them even had elytra on their backs. They seemed to be species that could fly from birth. Other than their forms, their skin colors were also different. Most of them were blackish red, but there was also dark gray, cyan, and some with overlapping skin. It seemed that the so-called demon was merely a generic term. Racial divisions were probably present among the demons as well. Different from Roy, who observed his environment after being born, these little demons seemed to be driven by instinct to devour their shells once they got out. The entire beach was brimming with the sounds of rustling and clattering as 2/3 of the demons munched away at their eggshells, which could cause people with ankylophobia to shrink into themselves. Roy watched the scene with caution. He did not possess the slightest feeling of comradeship with these little demons. However, he also noticed something. The little demons born now were different from when he was born. Most of their bodies were relatively dry, and there was not much mucus in the eggshells, unlike Roy's eggshell that had plenty of mucus left at the bottom, which had caused his body to be wet when he emerged. Roy realized that his body was not as big as these little demons, nor was he as strong compared with the little demons with similar skin color as him. Is this the consequence of premature birth? After a while, the little demons finished devouring their eggshells and did something else that made Roy feel a chill in his bones. 20 meters away on Roy's right was a little demon with black skin and a hideous face. He had 4 eyes on his forehead, and the pupils within were vertical. Behind him was a short tail. Roy watched as this little demon patted his stomach after finishing with his eggshell, picked up a cooled lava stone by his feet, and then hopped toward the part of the beach nearer to the sea behind him. There were quite a number of demon eggs on the beach that had yet to hatch. This little demon found one of the unhatched eggs, raised the stone with both hands, and smashed the shell. The eggshell cracked immediately upon impact, but the little demon did not stop there. He hit it again and again, directly breaking the eggshell. The sticky mucus in the egg flowed out after the eggshell broke. The little demon inside already had a full form and seemed to sense the danger he was in. He struggled to open his eyes and break out of the shell, but the demon was really ruthless. He lifted the stone and smashed the other little demon inside. The severe pain made the little demon shriek with pain. However, he was unable to stop the atrocities of the 4-eyed demon because of his restricted movement. The shrieks became weaker with every blow of the stone. He subconsciously knew that he was going to die before being born. Most of the other demons that hatched did the same thing as this 4-eyed demon, seeming to have agreed unanimously upon it. They used the stones on the ground as weapons to break the eggs of those demons that had yet to hatch and then kill the little demons within. Roy felt a chill down his spine from this extremely cruel scene. Is this the law of survival in the demon world? These demons did not even treat the other demons as their comrades, much less a fake one like Roy. Roy turned around and found that many of the little demons were clapping and jumping around proudly on the spot, quacking and laughing as though it was all a fun game after their kills. This habitual cruelty and murderousness seemed to be a common trait among even the infant demons. The 4-eyed demon not far from Roy completed his bloody kill at this time. A small ball of light appeared from the body of the dead little demon and wanted to fly away, but the vicious hand of the murderer grabbed it before it could. After catching the ball of light, the 4-eyed demon swallowed it whole. The 4-eyed demon's body began to tremble and immediately entered a strange state. Even a bystander like Roy could see that he seemed to be in ecstasy. A song suddenly appeared in Roy's mind after looking at his expression. "Heyo, I feel like my life has reached the climax. That ball of light is a soul." Roy reacted quickly and looked around, only to find those little demons that hatched first were collecting the souls of their kills and swallowing them whole. All of them revealed ecstatic expressions afterward. This should be caused by the soul-devouring addiction in a demon's nature. No wonder souls are linked to demons in so many legends. Roy found the opportunity to obtain his first soul, the little demons who did not manage to get out of their eggs. As a weak premature baby, Roy had a full sense of crisis. From his observations, all signs showed that only the strongest could survive in the demon world. He could not guarantee whether or not the little demons around him would set their sights on a weak guy like him, so he had to increase his capital at all costs to increase his chances of survival. Therefore, Roy immediately picked up a lava stone and ran toward a demon egg. Roy steeled his heart and hit the eggshell with the stone. A crack appeared on his first hit. He continued to smash until clack, and the eggshell finally broke. The mucus within flowed out, and inside housed a black demon with a sharp mouth like that of a worm. It struggled to climb out of survival instinct. However, its savage appearance took a burden off Roy as he pounded the stone on the demon worm's head. The strange body of the demon worm made it impossible to know where the head was, but it would definitely not go wrong if it was near the sharp mouth. Roy gritted his teeth and smashed it repeatedly. The demon worm became a white, slurry goo. The goo mixed with the purple demon blood, making it look simply revolting. Holding in his nausea, Roy completed his first kill and then collected the soul from this demon worm. However, the ball of light was a little dim, and its volume was a little small. It did not seem to be of good quality. In any case, Roy obtained his first soul. He could finally satisfy the requirement to use the save function to enhance himself. Revolver. Editor. Atlas Studios. The first soul came relatively easy since the opponent had almost no resistance. There would not be too many opportunities of this sort, so Roy wanted to seize the opportunity to grab a few more souls. He turned his head and found himself in an awkward situation. Too many boats were chasing too few fish. There was no choice since more eggs had hatched than the number that had not. In such a short amount of time, all of the demon eggs were gone. Roy only managed to get the demon egg because he had the advantage of proximity. Just as he wanted to obtain more, he saw a few little demons being slain over the demon egg in the distance. Seeing this scene, Roy was suddenly shocked. The way that the demon race was born gave him a really bad premonition again. Would these stronger little demons that had yet to snatch souls turn to the hatched weaker demons? Roy felt like he was next on the chopping board as he looked at his small arms and calves. No, I have to think of something quick. Roy quickly brought up the customization interface. He might be born a demon, but Roy still had human thinking. The first thing he thought of was to get himself a weapon. When he thought of weapons, it was naturally a firearm. His first thought was to draw a pistol. He chose a blank page on the interface and started working on it. Since he had no mouse, he could only draw with the brush tool directly by hand. Roy had some ideas. He knew that besides using a gun when he had military training in college, he had little understanding of firearms, so he drew a revolver this time. The advantage of a revolver was that it had a simple structure, was solid, had stable performance, would not easily malfunction, and would not jam at critical times. Even a dud would not affect the firing of the next bullet. Of course, Roy preferred exquisite, elegant, and modern firearms, but he gave up on the idea when he thought of the bullet jamming at a critical moment, feeling that a revolver would be much more suitable for a rookie like him. It did not take him long to complete a revolver. However, Roy had an urge to bang his head against a wall when he looked at the gun. Perhaps because he had not used his hand to draw for too long, but this revolver basically looked like graffiti. Places where it should have been straight were crooked, and places where it should have been curved were straight. It did not possess any form of artistic beauty at all. However, everyone in art design knew very well that a sketch had to be modified repeatedly before finalizing a design, so Roy was not discouraged. He only needed to use a few auxiliary line tools to modify and color it as well as retouch its highlights and shadows before completing the gun. However, a strange noise rang behind Roy just as he was about to operate the panel. Gawk! Roy stiffened and turned around quickly. The one making the strange cry turned out to be the four-eyed demon from just now. This four-eyed demon had already recovered from the pleasure of devouring his first soul, and he wanted to continue killing the unhatched eggs but found himself too late to the game. In his anger, he accidentally noticed this strange demon that was Roy. To be precise, he was attracted by the light of the soul floating beside Roy. When the other little demons were foraging for souls, Roy did not immediately devour the soul and immediately became as eye-catching as a firefly in the darkness. Therefore, this four-eyed demon turned toward Roy. His four eyes fixated on the soul beside Roy, and saliva dripped from his huge mouth full of sharp teeth. Demons had strong digestive systems, fueling their need for flesh, but if given a choice between soul and flesh, most would choose soul. When Roy turned around, the greed in the eyes of the four-eyed demon became increasingly obvious. His instinct and intuition told him that this demon in front of him was weak, and he would be able to obtain 2 souls if he were to kill him. Just like what Roy had predicted, the stronger demons that did not manage to grab souls had their sights on the weaker demons, and it was happening all around the four-eyed demon and Roy. A new round of massacre was about to begin. This was the law of the demon world. Only the strongest would be able to walk out of the place they were born. Roy immediately knew what the four-eyed demon wanted to do upon seeing his expression. He wanted to modify and perfect his drawing, but there seemed to be no choice now, so Roy watched the other party while on high alert and using the text function to quickly define the revolver he just drew. And the definitions he wrote were firearm, precision, and infinite ammunition. He completed the definitions swiftly while in the confrontational death glare with the four-eyed demon. He quickly used collage to pull the drawing onto the main page and placed it in the hand of his selfie. Finally, he saved. The shining soul floating beside Roy disappeared. However, what made him awkward was that the revolver he wanted did not appear in his hand. Instead, a prompt came from the system: insufficient souls. Saved only 23% of the progress. You can choose to cancel saving or to modify the drawing. Insufficient souls. My definitions for the gun exceeds the limit that I can use one soul for. This accident stunned Roy for a moment, and right at this moment, the four-eyed demon hissed angrily at him. The four-eyed demon's sight was on the soul beside Roy the whole time, yet it disappeared the moment Roy saved. The four-eyed demon would certainly feel angry since the prey he was about to obtain vanished before him. He could not see Roy's system interface, but he thought that Roy must have used some method to hide the soul. Therefore, he kicked the ground and flew at Roy. He was one size larger than Roy, so his weight was naturally different. He immediately ran Roy onto the ground and opened his mouth to bite at Roy's face. How could Roy dare to be bitten by him? He hurriedly waved his hand and slapped the demon's face, knocking his head crooked. This was his subconscious reaction. He only wanted to fight back after the other party threw himself at him. What he did not think of was how sharp his claws were. The slap left a few blood-stained wounds on the four-eyed demon's face. Gawk! The four-eyed demon was furious that his face was scratched bloody by Roy's claws and also used his claws to attack Roy. The little demons that just hatched were all infants and did not have many ways of fighting. There would not be any tactics in their battles, and they relied purely on their physical strength and their sharp claws. However, Roy was not as strong as the four-eyed demon, so he was on the losing end of the attacks. If the system rated his strength at 14, then this demon was at least at 20. He was much stronger than him. This can't carry on. Roy, who was overwhelmed and on the ground, took advantage of a gap in the attacks and suddenly kicked from the bottom upward, into the crotch of this four-eyed demon, dealing a vital blow to his weakness. He noticed that this four-eyed demon was a male, or rather, it seemed like males were the majority. Among this group of demons, all of them just hatched and had no clothes to cover themselves with, so it was simply too easy to aim for the right place. This was the only advantage Roy had, maintaining calmness and logic, not completely relying on physical instincts. However, the critical hit Roy imagined did not happen. While the kick caused the four-eyed demon to scream, he did not lose his combat strength. Instead, he took the opportunity to bite Roy's shoulder. It seemed like the weakness of human males was not the same for demons. Their privates were not as vulnerable. The four-eyed demon tore a piece of flesh off from Roy. He did not have much pain in his shoulders but instead a tingling sensation of paralysis, making Roy realize that this four-eyed demon's saliva might have poison. Creatures such as demons had already exceeded Roy's knowledge, so having such abilities was not at all surprising. Roy found himself getting more and more exhausted, and he had no other choice but to grit his teeth and bring out the interface again. He used one hand to parry the four-eyed demon's attack while his other hand worked swiftly. Roy should be thankful that he finished drawing the gun before the four-eyed demon attacked. Otherwise, he would have never been able to finish it during this fighting. Right now, he only needed to modify the text definitions. Roy already realized that it was definitely because the infinite ammunition attribute was too overpowered that he could not save the revolver. He was originally afraid that the firepower would not be high enough, so he wanted to have unlimited ammo. But now, it seemed as though the requirement for souls was very high if he wanted to materialize this function. Therefore, he erased infinite ammunition and even precision and changed them to full of bullets. Roy felt a weight in his right hand when he saved this time. It was cold to the touch. At this critical moment, Roy knew that he finally managed to save, but he did not have the time to look at it. Once his finger found the trigger, he immediately pressed the muzzle onto the abdomen of the four-eyed demon. The next second, a thunderous noise came. 50 cents special effects. Editor, Atlas Studios. This shot echoed through the entire beach, startling all the little demons fighting each other nearby. They stopped fighting in unison and turned their heads toward the direction of the sound. 2 consecutive gunshots immediately came again, scaring them. They had never heard such a bizarre sound. Roy, who opened fire, was taken aback as well because he realized that the four-eyed demon that he shot in the abdomen did not die immediately. Instead, he threw his head back in severe pain and ripped off a large piece of meat from Roy's left arm. Roy felt so much pain that he felt he was going mad. He aimed the muzzle of his gun on the stomach of the four-eyed demon and shot 2 more times. This time, the movements of the four-eyed demon finally froze. After a strong push from Roy, he fell off Roy and landed beside him as fresh blood oozed out from the 3 bullet holes, dyeing the sand beneath him purple-red in no time. A bloodied Roy climbed up from the ground, gasping as he looked at the four-eyed demon. He had such tenacious vitality that he was still alive. This pissed Roy off, so he pointed his gun at the forehead of the little demon and pulled the trigger again. This time, the four-eyed demon stayed silent. In order to ensure that the revolver could be saved and appear, Roy had even deleted the precision attribute. Anyway, for him, the accuracy of such a close-range attack did not matter. However, what he had not taken into account was that this four-eyed demon required 4 shots to die. His vitality was amazing. It was completely different from killing the demon worm in its eggshell. There was a huge difference between the demons that hatched and those that had not. Of course, that could also be because the firearm had insufficient power. The soul of the four-eyed demon emerged from its corpse. This soul was much stronger than the one that Roy obtained earlier, and it was also much brighter. Roy did not rush to get the soul. He looked up, and as expected, the little demons nearby started crowding around him. They were startled by the continuous gunshots just now and were curious to see what it was. Moreover, they saw a high-quality soul, tickling the greed in their demonic nature. Roy's current condition was not good. His entire upper body was covered with injuries, and his left shoulder had bite wounds. Even though the poisonous saliva of the four-eyed demon was not life-threatening, it was enough to make that half of his body numb. The left arm he had used to parry the attack revealed pale white bones. However, Roy knew he could not let his guard down even in such a miserable state. He was worried that once he showed fatigue or panic, these little demons gathering around him would not hesitate to pounce on him and tear him into pieces. Therefore, he raised his gun, pointed it at a closer demon, and shot at him. Bang! This shot did not hit the demon but landed on the ground near his feet. A series of sparks resulted from the friction. The little demon was shocked and quickly jumped away. Then Roy pointed the muzzle at another little demon. This little demon was smarter. When he saw it aimed at him, he escaped before Roy pulled the trigger. With this lesson in front of them, the little demons escaped whenever Roy pointed the muzzle at them. These little demons did not know that Roy only had 1 bullet left. They only felt that the thing in his hand was terrifying since it could kill a strong little demon, and none of them wanted to jump to their deaths. They all hoped the other little demons would go first. A while later, Roy did not even need to use his gun. He merely opened his mouth to scare them with his sharp teeth, and the little demons would then escape by themselves. Roy achieved his goal. Unfortunately, he still underestimated the demons' greed for souls. The little demons would carefully gather again as long as he did not put away the soul of the four-eyed demon. It gave Roy a headache. In fact, he could also feel his body instinctively hunger for the soul that was shining by his feet, causing him to salivate continuously. It should be because of soul-devouring addiction. Although Roy was dying to know what a soul tasted like, he knew that souls were his ticket to survival, so he could only resist his physical impulse and try to see if he could store this soul in the system. Unexpectedly, he succeeded, and that ball of light immediately disappeared. He noticed that the counter for number of souls in possession in his main attribute area of the system had changed from 0 to complete low-quality souls 1, low-quality souls about to disappear 1. The complete low-quality soul was probably the soul of the four-eyed demon, but that low-quality soul about to disappear baffled Roy for a while. If he did not guess wrong, that soul should be the first soul he obtained. What he did not expect was that after his revolver materialized, the soul had some remaining and did not disappear completely. The difference in soul consumption for different definitions and attributes surprised Roy once again. This soul was not enough when he added the infinite ammunition attribute earlier. Is this the difference between white equipment and blue and purple equipment? Roy was regretting now. If he had known that the system could store souls, he would have first stored the demon worm's soul in it, and he would not have needed to fight the four-eyed demon then. As soon as the soul disappeared, the little demons gathering nearby instantly became restless. Roy raised his gun again vigilantly, but the little demons dispersed, running to other places that had fighting to see if they could get anything out of it. Roy finally sat on the ground, relieved that his crisis was over. However, he did not have the consciousness that he had a tail and thus sat on it, causing him great pain. Seems like I have to change my human habits after changing form. After sighing and moving his tail aside, he finally settled down to look at the revolver he had drawn. However, Roy's head filled with black lines once he took a good look at it. What could he say? This gun he held was simply too strange. If he had to use one phrase to describe it, it would be 50 cents special effects. Not 1 cent more. It was too fake. It was already crooked when he was drawing it, and then because of the emergency, he had not colored it at all. He had not even defined its material. It felt like a white plastic gun in his hand. The background color when drawing was white. It was crudely made with plastic spikes everywhere, as though it were just taken out of a plastic mold. Roy dared to swear that this was not as good as the BB gun he played when he was young. However, this was where it got weird. This cheap special effects gun could actually be fired and was really powerful. This was purely because Roy defined a firearm attribute to it. This was the first time that Roy felt that this custom system was truly extraordinary. Using text to define the strength through the system was akin to the power of language, or like the information material conversion technology in the novels that Roy read before. Moreover, it had idiot-proof operations. Roy could not help but to feel happy when he thought back to him fighting monsters and going on quests for equipment in his games. Now, he had gone one step further to creating his own equipment. He now had another soul, and the quality did not seem half bad. However, Roy was not in a rush to upgrade the revolver in his hand. Instead, he summoned the system interface and began drawing again. This time, he drew a test tube and a line in the middle to indicate the liquid level. He then chose blue to color the inside of the test tube. A test tube filled with blue liquid appeared, and Roy defined it with the text, antidote. Yes, what he had to do first was to resolve his poison status. In order to save on consumption, he did not define too many things about the antidote and only intended to use up the soul that was about to disappear. The poison from the four-eyed demon shouldn't be that powerful, so it should be relieved with this, right? Roy was about to save when he completed it, but he changed the color of the liquid to dark brown after giving it some thought. Moreover, he added another attribute in the definition, cola-flavored. After making that addition, Roy saved it satisfactorily. Unsurprisingly, the soul that was about to disappear truly did disappear, and a dark brown potion appeared in Roy's hand. Come, let's drink this happy drink of all nerds. Roy lifted his hand and downed it, earthquake, volcano. Editor, Atlas Studios. A while after drinking the cola-flavored antidote, Roy could feel the numbness on his shoulder lessening. It works. The effect isn't too obvious, but it really works against the poison. Roy sighed with relief, and now only the wound was left. He originally wanted to draw something to stop the bleeding and some bandages, but he felt that it did not do the consumption of souls justice. Roy looked at the battling demons nearby. These demons would not get away unscathed even if they were to win, and Roy wanted to know how they dealt with their wounds. In the end, he saw most of them licking their wounds until they stopped bleeding. The beast-like behavior made Roy feel helpless, but he could only follow. He knew that too much blood loss was not good for any creature, even a demon. Fortunately, the revolver in Roy's hand gave the demons nearby a great deterrent, and none of them disturbed him while he licked his wounds quietly. After a while, his severely wounded left arm gradually stopped bleeding. The strong devouring the weak continued on the beach. From time to time, the stronger demons killed their prey and swallowed the souls of these weaker demons, leaving no chance for the other demons. Seeing this, Roy extinguished the thought of taking advantage of the situation. The importance of souls to Roy, who had the system, was self-evident. However, demons had soul-devouring addiction, creating many competitors for him. Whenever he thought of this situation, Roy could not help but want to sigh. After he stopped his bleeding, Roy opened the system interface. This time, he drew some bullets for the revolver, materialized them with the consumption of the four-eyed demon's soul, and filled them into the cheap revolver. He did not know what else he would encounter later, so it was important for him to ensure the state of his weapon. However, after he loaded the magazine, the situation suddenly changed again. A sudden tremor came from the ground. This tremor was so strong that even Roy felt dizzy while standing. What's happening? A big earthquake. The tremor continued for quite a while before gradually stopping. Roy recovered and found that the little demons that were fighting frantically earlier stopped after the tremor. They suddenly gave simultaneous strange cries, as though they woke up from a dream, and started running forward desperately. Those without wings dashed on all four, those with wings took off into the sky. They were moving forward desperately even though they did not fly high. Seeing their actions, Roy did not say anything and immediately started to run as well. Although he did not know where to run to or why he was running away, he was clear that it was definitely not a coincidence for so many demons to be doing the same thing. Something was going to happen. Fortunately, Roy was used to running with both feet, so his injured left arm did not affect his mobility, making Roy thank his lucky stars that he was not wounded in the leg during combat. Otherwise, it would have been troublesome. As he followed the little demons all the way across the vast beach, the scorching green smoke and the heat gradually dissipated. The scene in front of them became clearer as well. The destination of these little demons turned out to be a black volcano with smoke emitting from its top. Is the volcano erupting? Roy was uncertain, but if it's really going to erupt, why are the little demons not fleeing from it but toward it? No matter what Roy thought, the little demons at the forefront rushed up the volcano without looking back. They jumped between the gullies formed by the molten magma and crossed strange black stone all the way to the top. Those insect-like and bird-like demons with wings went straight for the top of the volcano and plunged into the hole on top. Are they really flying into the volcano? Roy was shocked, but he turned back to look at the army of little demons behind him and could only force himself to run up the mountain. He knew he lacked the instinct and the inherited memories imprinted into the bones of a demon, and he did not know what the other little demons knew. They must have their reasons for running into the volcano. After all, it's impossible for all the little demons to court their own deaths, right? Therefore, it's right to follow them. As to whether or not he would perish in the flames of the volcano, it remained to be seen. He could only follow the actions of the little demons. The altitude of the volcano was pretty high. Fortunately, the route was pretty clear, and there was no such thing as getting lost. Roy climbed along a straight line and reached the top of the volcano in no time. For the first time, he saw the insides of a volcano. He saw a straight deep pit with smoke increasing gradually, and at the bottom of the volcano was a bright fiery color. At the bottom, there was a thin layer of magma that solidified with countless irregular cracks, and that fiery color seeped out from these cracks. It looked like countless fiery red lightning appearing at the bottom of the redness. The scene was truly spectacular. It might be spectacular, but the meaning behind it was terrifying as well. It seemed like it would not take long for the cracked magma to buckle under the pressure and eventually form a volcanic eruption. If he did not find a way to leave as soon as possible, he would not even have a corpse left. As he stood atop the volcano, Roy looked around and realized that this hatching place was actually an island with a blood-red ocean surrounding the island. Going by how the previous hatching place actually extended all the way to the beach, it meant that the area covered by the volcanic eruption was rather large. The entire island seemed to be within its eruption range, and he could not avoid it unless he headed into the ocean. And only God knew what dangerous creatures the bizarre blood-red ocean harbored. No wonder why these little demons hurried to the volcano before it erupted. They have no other place to evacuate to. Watching how the other little demons climbed down the inner wall of the volcano, Roy also learned how to use the sharp claws of his forelimbs to climb down. However, Roy could only hold on with his injured left arm while using his right arm and feet to climb down. He moved cautiously, ensuring that he gripped firmly every step of the way because he saw many little demons losing their footing and falling to their deaths on the thin layer of magma rocks. Hell, abyss. Editor, Atlas Studios. Thousands of little demons poured in from the mouth of the volcano. This scene was a little shocking, but Roy realized that the little demons that arrived near the bottom earlier did not go all the way to the bottom. Instead, they were searching for something on the inner wall of the volcano. They used their claws to tap, trying to probe the inner wall of the volcano. While Roy wondered what they were doing, a little demon screamed in surprise and then started to dig desperately at the place where he tapped. Most importantly, the other little demons actually ran over to help. This was such a strange scene. It was the first time Roy saw the little demons cooperating with each other. It did not take long for these little demons to dig a black hole. The moment the hole appeared, the little demons cheered and swarmed in. There were more holes than just one such one. Little demons made holes everywhere in the inner wall of the volcano, and the nearby demons would enter together. Roy finally realized that the holes made by these demons were thin and weak points in the inner wall of the volcano. There were actually countless caves of all sizes in this volcano, but every time the volcano erupted, the surging magma would fill them up. The pressure from the eruption was not too strong, so while it would fill up after every eruption, they would reappear after some digging. This behavior of digging caves out had already been carved into the demon genes for millions of years. After comprehending it, Roy did not give it any other thought. He followed a group of demons behind him to dig a hole and crowd into a cave. Thousands of little demons disappeared into the caves in an orderly manner like ants returning to their nests. An explosive sound came not long after they crowded into the caves. Hot magma broke through from the bottom layer of rocks and shot up into the sky. With great vigilance, Roy followed the little demons, marching into the cave without light. He, of course, had to guard against the sneak attacks of the other little demons in this dark environment. What was strange was that the aggression of these little demons had greatly reduced after leaving the place they hatched. They ran into the cave quickly without any thought of attacking the others. When the volcano erupted, a lot of magma poured into the hole they dug in the rear, blocking the hole again. However, none of the little demons were hurt by the magma. Roy thought the little demons would stop once the magma stopped pouring in, but those in front did not stop at all. Roy could only continue moving forward because the little demon behind him would push him and growl, hurrying him once he stopped and blocked the path. Roy did not expect the cave to be so long. He felt as though they had come a long way from the volcano. And according to Roy's feeling, the cave seemed to be going diagonally all the way deep into the ground. This meant that they were moving toward the crust. Roy was very anxious. He did not know where these little demons were heading to, but he had a premonition. Is the place they're heading to where demons really live? After an unknown period of time, strange emotional cheers suddenly traveled backward from the front. Upon hearing the cheer, the little demons in the rear became agitated and hurried along. Roy was driven by their movements and accelerated forward as well. As expected, a bright light appeared from the front. After he walked in the cave for such a long time, Roy's eyes had adapted to the darkness, so the light he saw dazzled him. But in fact, the light coming from the front was not strong at all. It was dim red and accompanied by a heatwave, rolling in without stopping. Finally, Roy reached the exit. It was the huge mouth of the cave, which made him look really small. However, Roy could not attend to sighing in relief right now. Instead, he looked on dumbfounded at the scene that unfolded before him. It turned out to be a massive underground space where a dimly lit world appeared. The ground was scorched black soil, the forest was twisted black, and a large river formed by lava flowed slowly. The momentum moving the river came from the dozens of waterfalls of magma from the cave walls. They flowed from a great height accompanied by green smoke and sparks, stirring the airflow of the underground world, making the air hot. The hot winds rolled the black soot up from the ground, causing the air to be pretty dirty. There was also a range of mountains, some of which were high and low, but most of them had the same color and tone. It could be said that this was a black and red world. Black was the black ashes, while red was the redness from the flames. From Roy's current perspective, he could only observe a small part of this underground world. There was a horizon in the distance that Roy could not even begin to imagine how big it was. According to Roy's understanding, this underground world should be under the seabed, a cavity formed between the crust and the mantle. Here, the sky was a dome supported by the hardened rock, and the ground was heated up by the core, which was why it looked hot. Roy felt sorrow from within thinking about how he would need to live in this hell-like world. However, when the skin of his demon body felt the searing air in here, his body actually jumped for joy, giving him an urge to enter this world. The contrast between his thoughts and his body made him want to laugh and cry at the same time. The little demons behind Roy had already excitedly climbed down along the cave's rock wall. Roy stood there blankly for a while before he finally sighed and followed suit. Those with wings had already flown out. Hundreds of thousands of little demons that came from the hatching area poured out of the caves like ants and scattered into this underground world, but this scene felt underwhelming. They were not the first batch of demons to enter this world, nor would they be the last. How many such demons lived in this underground world? And how many adult demons were there? What Roy, who was climbing down along the wall of the cave, did not know was that he had only scrapped the uppermost level of the endless abyss of the hell that was the demon world, the self-cultivation of a little demon. Editor, Atlas Studios. Roy carried a strange creature the size of a rabbit on his shoulder as he ran on the hot ground and carefully observed all around. Walking through a dark forest, he carefully passed by the twisted branches of distorted trees. These trees were demonic trees, and once any living creature touched the branches, they would immediately wrap around and frantically capture the prey. Among the dark trees, there were many places with dense white spiderwebs. These spiderwebs were things that he had to be even more careful about, for where there were spiderwebs meant he had entered the hunting range of a spider demon. Suddenly, a peculiar cry came from the sky above the forest. Roy quickly fell to the ground and put the strange creature he was carrying on his shoulder onto his back and lay motionless. A giant shadow flew over him, but luckily, it did not seem to discover Roy lying on the ground and flew straight over him. Roy was fortunate. He had already made plans to give up his prey. If that dark shadow were to swoop down on him, its first grab would have been the prey on his back. Finally, he avoided all sorts of danger to come to a huge tree at the edge of the forest. This huge tree was already dead and decayed. However, there was a naturally formed hole at its roots, which had become Roy's residence. After arriving at the tree hole, Roy did not head into it immediately but first carefully observed the camouflage he had set up. Only when he found that there were no traces of it being disturbed did he pick up the rotten branches and leaves of the hole and go in with the prey. In the cave, Roy put down the prey on his shoulder and then let out a long sigh of relief. It had been more than a week since he came to this underground world, and he had finally adapted to life here. Although there were many dangers to him in terms of environments and other predators, he could avoid them if he was careful. Over the past week, Roy's greatest progress was learning how to hunt. He had no choice since all living creatures needed to eat to survive, and Roy was naturally no exception. However, even now, the prey he could catch was limited. In addition to the demons, there were many other monsters living in the underground world. These monsters were equivalent to the wild beasts of the human world. However, to be honest, it was difficult for Roy to distinguish between the low-rank demons and the monsters by appearance alone. From his observations, most of the low-rank demons were basically following their physical instincts to hunt, kill, and destroy. This behavior did not show much wisdom at all and was not much different from that of the monsters. In other words, they had low intelligence. Nonetheless, it did not mean that they were pushovers. In fact, the demon race was the master of this world. Even a low-rank demon's body would become stronger and stronger as they gradually grew into adulthood. If they could survive for a long time, they would gradually move up to the top of the food chain. The infant demons were existences only at the low rank, and they would slowly upgrade to the middle low rank and finally the top of the low rank when they matured. If their bloodlines were not too complicated, they might even have the chance to promote to middle rank demons. Roy did not know what a middle rank demon looked like because he had not encountered one so far, so he had been wondering if there was a world deeper than where he was that he could enter through some entrances. However, Roy's scope of exploration was limited, and he had yet to find these entrances. These were the conclusions that Roy made while observing, coupled with some educated guesses. Even if there were deviations, it seemed like he was not too far off the mark. At the same time, Roy's body was growing, becoming slightly bigger and taller. He might not have passed 1.2 meters yet, but his strength attribute increased by 2 in the system interface. His speed also increased a little, although his magic energy did not move at all. The one with the most change was his activity, increasing a whole 5 to 18. Strength, speed, and magic energy were easy to understand, but the activity attribute baffled Roy slightly. According to his experience during this period, he realized that it might be referring to his vitality. A strong vitality represented the degree of injury he could withstand and the amount of time he would need to recover after his injury. After putting his prey down, Roy started preparing his dinner. Roy did not know what to call this strange creature he caught, but it should be some kind of monster, and an infant one at that. This was because Roy saw it drilling out of the ground and caught it when it tried to climb onto a tree. In his memory, only certain insects would have such behavior. This strange monster looked like a fat worm, but it had 4 claw-like legs, resembling an ant without its pliers, and a big hole on its head made by Roy's gun. Roy had not upgraded his revolver, but he had spent some time adding some details to the body of the gun. It now resembled the Colt Python revolver in his memory. After modifying the barrel to make it straighter, he realized he had a certain degree of accuracy at long-range shots, unlike how he only dared to fire at close range with the 50-cent special effects before. As for why he did not upgrade this weapon, he realized that it was not cost-effective to do so. During this time, Roy had encountered several adult demons. Although he only saw them from a distance, he realized that the defense of these adult demons had improved greatly. In particular, the insect-shaped low-rank demon covered in a carapace with a shiny metallic luster made Roy feel that even bullets would not be able to penetrate it. Unless Roy were willing to consume a large number of souls to add some attributes such as break armor and penetration, he would die horribly with such a gun when he met such defensive-type demons. After realizing that external weapons would be limited in the future, Roy began to put his efforts into the transformation of his body. His own strength was true strength, especially so for creatures like demons, but Roy needed time to become an adult. According to the system's evaluation, it would be difficult for him to become the top of the low rank in this life. Promotion had nothing to do with him at all because his bloodline was simply too complex. Not only him, but even most of the other hatched demons could only become the top of the low rank. However, Roy had another option now due to the existence of this system. Roy could draw in exchange for human food such as braised beef and dompo pork knuckles through the consumption of souls instead of taking risks hunting like what he was doing. However, he did so without any hesitation because he was accumulating souls, and his plan for the transformation of his body required a large number of souls. His prey had souls as well, though their quality was lacking. The quality of the souls seemed to be linked to the intelligence possessed. The higher the intelligence and the richer the emotion, the higher the quality of the soul formed after death. The quality Roy could obtain now was low, so he could only hope to obtain more of them. Over the past week, he had caught 4 prey and obtained 4 souls. However, these souls were smaller than that of the 4-eyed demon previously. Even so, Roy felt that it was an adequate amount. Roy ate this insect monster while resisting his psychological discomfort. He did not even dare to set a fire to cook it because he was worried that the smell would attract powerful enemies. He did not need to worry too much about the smell of blood since it permeated the entire forest. He had to do what he had to do to survive before he could protect himself. After sating the hunger in his belly, Roy summoned the system interface and began his first physical transformation. Modification Plan. Editor. Atlas Studios. In addition to carefully exploring, observing, and hunting, Roy had been drafting designs these past few days. The first draft he completed used his hands as reference objects. He made his entire palm bigger and savage, seeming as though a bony shell and messy bone spurs that protruded like nails covered it. He even lengthened his nails and made them sharper with a hook-like curvature. It even glowed with the radiance of metal. Roy's initial definitions for this transformation were steel material and flexible. Yes, this was Roy's first modification plan, creating a pair of hands with steel claws for himself. This was just a preliminary idea. In Roy's conception, if he had enough souls in the future, he also planned to transform his nails to be made of adamantium in order to achieve an indestructible and powerful force. He also planned for this transformation to extend to his whole arm. This idea naturally came from the claws of Wolverine. However, Roy guessed that the number of souls and their quality were probably insufficient to have them made with adamantium, so his current thought was to transform them into ordinary steel. With such a sharp pair of claws, his advantage in combat was self-evident. Even if he encountered a strong opponent, he could easily tear through their defense with them. Moreover, a weapon of his own would not have problems such as a shortage of ammunition. The second modification plan was Roy's tail. Due to his different body structure, Roy could not walk completely upright like how he used to as a human. He could stand up but not straighten his body, causing him to slouch. For now, he had been using this arrow-like tail to keep his body in balance. Other than that, his tail was not very useful. Not only was it unable to help Roy in combat, but it was also a weak point of his body, being sensitive and fragile, bringing him a lot of pain once it was hurt. Therefore, in order to eliminate this weakness, Roy's second modification plan was for his tail. He drew a long tail that extended from his spine. It had sections, from thick to sharp, beautifully streamlined. Roy designed 3 bone knives that could open and close at the tip of his tail. When opened, it could grab objects. When closed, it could become a triangular blade that could pierce through a thick steel plate easily. If done according to his vision, this long tail, once combined with his body, could even give his spine a protruding blade-shaped bone, making him look more domineering and savage. He had no other choice. He was disheartened by this world where appearance was everything. It was the same even in this demon world. Here, the value of looks was strong, scary, and savage. If your appearance did not possess any deterring force and could not invoke fear in others, then probably even ordinary monsters would dare to test you out. Now that Roy had become a demon without any human form, he freed himself completely and let his imagination run wild. Roy was rather satisfied with the design of the tail. His definitions for the tail were bone material, flexible, regeneration, and hard as steel. After he had sufficient souls in the future, Roy also planned to transform the tail into adamantium so that it could become a true steel tail in the truest sense of the word. The third modification plan was also the last modification plan that Roy had come up with recently. It was not for partial transformation, but for the entire body. In the third picture, Roy drew a syringe gun and a test tube that matched with the syringe gun. This test tube was very interesting. The upper and lower ends were encapsulated in silver-white metal, while in the middle were 2 separate, spiraling tubes with a blue liquid inside. Very familiar, right? That's right, because Roy's definition for this liquid was T-virus. Since it was for the whole body, the first thing that Roy thought was a strengthening agent, and when it came to strengthening agents, the first things he thought of were the T-virus and the super soldier serum. Roy could recall the appearance of the T-virus from the movies, but he was unclear about the super soldier serum. Of course, he could have just drawn a random test tube and then defined it as a strengthening agent. It would have worked as well, but Roy felt that such a creation out of thin air might require many more souls than something he already had formed in his memory. Just like the revolver he had made before, he had given it a basic definition, the size, the volume, and so on when drawing it. The additional text definitions were just to perfect it. However, something he thought of out of thin air required a more detailed definition, thereby requiring more souls. As such, Roy finally chose the T-virus. It was in itself a concept that was to thoroughly optimize and evolve his genes for the purpose of enhancing physical fitness and eliminating diseases. This was derived from the concept given to it in the movies, novels, and games. Moreover, it was the most basic enhancement when compared to the G virus, the Veronica virus, and the like. It was very suitable for Roy's current weak body and had little chance of being incompatible. However, due to concerns about its stability and whether or not his demon body could adapt to this virus, Roy gave 2 additional definitions to this T-virus: perfect infusion and no side effects. This way, he did not need to worry about becoming a zombie. If the existing souls that Roy possessed could materialize the T-virus, then he could become stronger after injecting himself with it. If he was lucky, he might even obtain superpowers. It was super efficient. 3 modification plans, 3 drawings formed 3 materials. He was now ready to see which one would cost the least. He had the soul of a lower rank demon and 4 monsters. These 5 souls were all complete low quality souls in the system's evaluation, and only their volumes and values were different, so Roy started testing each material one by one. The modification drawings of both hands and tail adaptively changed sizes to match his body after being placed on the main page of the interface. The T-virus did not need adaptation and was displayed immediately. However, after his tests, Roy discovered that the number of souls he had was only enough to complete the tail. This surprised Roy because the tail had the most attributes defined. Why is it the tail if more attributes require more souls? Other than the tail at 100%, modification of his hands could only reach 20% completion, while the T-virus was even less at only 5%. In other words, if Roy wanted to transform his hands, he needed at least 5 times more souls than he currently possessed. Furthermore, he would need 20 times more souls for the T-virus. What the hell is going on? After careful study, Roy realized what was wrong. The reason why the modification of his hands required more souls even though he defined fewer attributes was probably that he defined the material as steel. It was naturally more difficult for steel to have the flexibility of a living body. It had to be a biometal to achieve this. On the contrary, there might be more definitions for the tail, but the material was bone. That meant that it could be completed by proliferating Roy's own cells. The definition of hard as steel was only to strengthen the bone, so the overall modification of the tail was easier than the hands. As for the T-virus, Roy understood immediately. After giving it the 2 definitions, the T-virus became the perfect strengthening agent, which was why it required so many souls. In that case, Roy could almost confirm his modification plan immediately, either directly modify the tail or change the definitions for the arm and then modify his arm. He did not even need to think about the T-virus for the time being. After giving it some thought, he chose to modify his tail and eliminate his weakness first. After attaching the tail to his body on the main page and pressing save, a tingling sensation spread throughout his spine. This feeling was really uncomfortable. Roy wanted to rub his back hard on the floor in order to alleviate his discomfort. However, he was very clear that it was best not to do so, so he forced himself to endure it. After some time, when Roy was still in a trance, that itchiness finally disappeared, and with it came a strange sense of power, territorial awareness. Editor: Atlas Studios. Originally, Roy's arrow tail gave him the feeling of weakness and helplessness, and his tail often hurt because of his lack of subconscious self-protection. However, it was all different now. A feeling of power coming from the tail grew from within. Knowing that his modification was complete, Roy felt a sudden elation. He listened to the clicking of the tail vertebrae and brought the savage-looking tail into view. It moved according to his will, and there was not the slightest stagnation nor delay. It was indeed a part of his body. Roy appreciated his work with great satisfaction. Perhaps it was because it matched his current body shape, but the stoutness of his tail had reduced. Now, it looked more reasonable and harmonious, matching Roy's dark red skin. And due to Roy's definitions, this dark red color glowed like a gem, and the hardness of his tail far surpassed his imagination. Moreover, the red glow flowed along his tail every time he shook it, as though flames were flowing on it. The 3 blades on the tip of his tail operated as he willed. The strangest thing was when Roy flicked his tail hard, the speed at which the 3 blades cut the air actually brought about a terrible roar. Roy looked around and suddenly launched his tail to shoot at the inside of the tree hole. The next moment, it pierced through the half-meter thick tree trunk. He was surprised to find that the range of his tail actually exceeded its length. This was due to the gap between the joints of the tail. When it fully extended, the joints could stretch like a spring, causing its range to extend. This benefit in combat was naturally self-evident. Any enemy that tried to estimate his attack range by sight would definitely regret it. Roy was extremely satisfied. He knew that the stoutness of his tail would increase with his growth and make a very useful weapon. He opened the system interface and found that not only did his image within it change, but even his attributes had changed. Strength and speed increased by more than 5 points. Roy's strength was now 21, and speed was 18. This felt strange to Roy. Why did the modification cause my attributes to increase? After studying it, he vaguely guessed that the muscles in his body might have strengthened to adapt to this tail. After all, a body was a whole for any living creature, and a slight movement in one part would affect it in its entirety. Roy tested his body and found that this was indeed the case. The biggest changes were the muscles around his waist and thighs, strengthened for him to use his tail better. This made Roy sigh. This customization system was really idiot-proof and automatically filled in the gaps that he overlooked. He stretched his hand to touch his back and found that the bones on his spine had also risen. The blade-like bone fins made Roy's overall image more terrifying, but it also meant that Roy could forget about sleeping on his back from now on. After discovering this, Roy was speechless. Thinking about sleep made Roy realize that he was sleepy. He had not actually slept much over the past week. The sense of crisis that haunted him since he arrived in an unfamiliar environment had not disappeared. How was Roy supposed to sleep in such circumstances? In addition, the demon body gave him a lot of energy, so he basically spent his time awake, either hunting, drawing modification materials, or spending time exploring around his residence. There was not an idle moment. Up until now, when he finally finished his first modification and felt his strength increase, becoming more powerful, bringing him a strong sense of security. After relaxing a bit, sleepiness began to strike him. Even so, Roy did not rush to sleep. He first removed the remainder of the monsters he ate just now from his cave, dispelled the smell of blood from it, and then covered the cave up with leaves and stone. He put a strange-looking fruit down only after he felt like everything was in order, and then he found a comfortable posture on the ground and closed his eyes. He did not know why, but Roy felt like he might sleep for a long time, which was why he did so much preparation work. Ellipsis. In this underground world, there was no difference between day and night. Roy woke up from his deep slumber after an unknown amount of time passed. He stretched and listened to the sound of his cracking bones all over his body, feeling very comfortable. Roy found that he seemed to have grown taller. Even his palm was visibly bigger than before he fell asleep. How long did I sleep? Roy looked puzzledly at the strange-looking fruit he had placed before he slept and found that the fruit had long rotted away. This level of decay requires at least 2 months. In that case, did I sleep for 2 whole months? Roy did not possess a timekeeping tool, so he could only keep track of time this way. Of course, there were discrepancies this way, but Roy did not need to be precise. Anyway, as a demon, time no longer held any meaning to him. He did not need to care about heading to work. It's okay if it was 2 months. Wasn't too long. Roy's greatest worry was for a demon's slumber to be the same as the dragons in novels that slept for years on end. If that happened, he would lose his energy and become lazy. The reason why he was worried about becoming lazy was the fact that he was a typical Gemini. He was active and greedy for fresh things. After his crisis of survival faded away, his curiosity started to surface. To him, since he had accepted his identity as a demon, he needed to understand more about this demon world. Simply put, Roy wanted to head out and explore. He did not like being stuck in a place for too long, and he felt that he would go crazy if he really had to sleep for years like dragons. Roy found that his current height seemed to have exceeded 1.2 meters by visual estimation. He was happy, but the sound of rumbling in his stomach reminded him that it was time to find food. He went to the entrance of the tree and listened to the sounds outside. After finding nothing out of the ordinary, he removed the stone that he had used to block the entrance and walked out. However, when he emerged, he realized in shock that a white spiderweb had occupied near his cave. Of course, he knew that there was a group of spiders not far away. Therefore, he was careful not to alarm them every time he headed back to the cave. However, what Roy did not expect was that in just 2 months, these spiders had expanded their hunting range to his residence. I almost ran into a spiderweb just as I went out. How is this okay? Roy nearly blew up. How can I allow outsiders to sleep beside my bed? Even humans have territorial awareness, let alone demons. Therefore, Roy made his first decision after waking up, killing all these damn demon spiders that had occupied his territory, getting into big trouble. Editor. Atlas Studios. Large and small spiderwebs intertwined messily between trees, turning this area into a small labyrinth. In this labyrinth, any form of panic would bring him straight into the spiderwebs. Once he was stuck on these extremely adhesive spiderwebs, he would be unable to break free. At the same time, the struggle would attract the spiders lurking in the dark. They would first spray a dissolving toxin onto their prey and then wait a while for the prey to completely dissolve into a pile of goo before calmly enjoying them. Roy had observed the process of their predation before. He also knew that there was a cluster of spiders and that they were social creatures. Once a spider appeared, a group of them might be near. Through observation, Roy found that these spider demons could only be regarded as ordinary monsters. Their intelligence was not high, and their living habits were rather fixed. Other than their numbers, they were not that difficult to deal with for Roy. He held the Colt python in his right hand and picked up a long branch from the ground with his left hand. When he came to a spiderweb, he used the branch to poke and shake it, simulating the effect of an entangled prey. Before long, a spider demon the size of a millstone appeared quietly from a tree. Since it was a monster, its size was naturally not comparable to that of ordinary spiders. Its strange patterns and hair made it look extremely hideous and ugly. It climbed onto tree trunks with its hooked limbs and made rustling sounds. Its huge swollen belly and the numerous black eyes on its forehead made it look creepy even though Roy knew it had poor eyesight. These spider demons were quite cunning. They would usually judge the size of their prey by the vibrations that traveled through the spiderweb. If the vibration was strong, it meant that the prey was large and not to be messed with. Moreover, there was a possibility of it breaking free from the spiderweb. In such a situation, they would not show up. However, if the vibration was relatively weak, it meant that the prey was not too big and unlikely to struggle free from the spiderweb. Such prey could be slaughtered. The vibration that Roy made through the branch was naturally incomparable to the vibrations of real entangled prey. So although the spider demon appeared, it was puzzled and did not immediately crawl to the web. However, Roy only needed it to appear. Once it appeared in his line of sight, Roy raised the Colt in his hand, took aim, and shot. Boom! The giant body of the spider demon was an easy target. Roy's shot hit its head directly, punching a big hole in it. The spider demon hissed painfully and fell from the tree. However, it did not die immediately. Its entire body and limbs were still twitching and trembling. Roy stepped forward and stood in front of the spider demon. He raised his tail and punctured the place where he shot it as fast as lightning. He stirred around and turned the spider demon's brain into mush. The limbs of this spider demon contracted, and it died completely. A tiny soul emerged from its body, and Roy grabbed it. If the soul of the four-eyed demon was as big as a table tennis ball, then the soul of this spider demon was only as big as a soybean. It was even smaller than those of the monsters that Roy had caught. Roy could not figure out what was going on, but he still put that soul away. After storing it away, the description of this soul given by the system interface was, low-quality soul fragments 1. Not a soul, but a soul fragment. Roy was a little stunned. What does that mean? No one could give him an explanation. He pushed that thought aside with doubts in his mind and turned to walk toward another spiderweb. Every spiderweb had a spider demon lying in wait. These spider demons would not go into each other's areas, so there was no threat once he resolved the spider demon lying in wait. Roy's original plan was to burn these spiderwebs, but then he thought of how these spiderwebs without their spider demons might help him block intruders from breaking into his cave. He could use them as security, so he left them. As long as he could clean up all the spider demons, the spiderwebs they left behind could become protective barriers for his cave. This was the only contribution they could provide to him. With this in mind, Roy started to clean up every spiderweb that appeared in his line of sight. He would first lure the spider demons with the vibrations and then shoot them down with his gun. This cleaning process actually turned out to be rather easy. However, later on, he realized that it was too much of a waste of his bullets. As such, he looked around and found an insect monster that was just entangled in a spiderweb. This insect monster looked like a big beetle. After it was entangled, the spider demon guarding that spiderweb appeared in no time and climbed onto the spiderweb without hesitation. At that moment, Roy, who had been standing below and waiting, swung his tail. The triangular blade tail directly penetrated the spider demon's head before it could bite into that insect monster. Roy's modification to his body was wise, and this strange-looking tail displayed its great killing efficiency. There was no need to waste his bullets, frugal and environmentally friendly. After killing the spider demon, Roy extended his tail, opened the triangular blade, gently grabbed the beetle, and pulled it off the spiderweb. This beetle monster did not possess much intelligence, so it did not appreciate Roy's help of pulling it out of danger at all. When Roy's tail grabbed it, it actually opened its mouth to bite his tail, acting rather fierce. However, was it possible for it to bite through Roy's tail? Glancing at it coldly, Roy grabbed it with his tail, walked to another spiderweb, and then flicked it hard, throwing the beetle onto another spiderweb. The beetle began to struggle again. Soon, the spider demon guarding this spiderweb appeared. Roy's baiting plan using this beetle monster was a success, and he successfully solved dozens of spider demons this way. Roy only killed the beetle monster with his tail when it no longer had the strength to continue struggling, and he stored this little soul with a grin. The souls from the spider demons were all soul fragments without exception. The harvested souls of this massacre were, in fact, very pitiful. Not only was the quality low, but they were also very small. Just as Roy was feeling depressed about his harvest, he found the light above his head being blocked by something, and a huge shadow appeared on the ground. At the same time, a voice came. "Caught you, you mean little bug." This voice was strange. It clearly sounded very strange to his ears, but Roy could fully understand the meaning it conveyed. It was as though the voice seemed to be acting directly on his soul. What was even weirder was that Roy immediately understood what was going on when he heard the voice. "This is the demon language." Roy's response was not slow even though he was stunned. He kicked the ground violently and somersaulted, rolling out of the range of the shadow. Boom! The place where he just stood was immediately attacked just as he rolled away. A huge black shadow with an unparalleled momentum directly hit the ground. A large amount of black mud splashed around, and a pit appeared in the ground. Roy climbed up and saw the attacker's appearance clearly. It was a bigger spider demon. However, unlike the spider demons he had killed earlier, what he was facing now was a half-human, half-spider female spider demon. The lower part of her waist was a large spider abdomen, and her upper body was humanoid, naked but covered with the hair of the spider, which prevented any thoughts of temptation. She had many eyes on the top of her head, and a tongue-like tongue slipped out. Only the pair of curved demon horns on her head showed her demon status. Coupled with the 8 limbs on both sides of her body, her entire body stood like a tank in front of Roy. Looking at the half-human, half-spider thing in front of him, Roy could not help but suck in a cold breath. He knew he was in deep shit. Judging from the size of his opponent, it was probably an adult demon and at least at the top of the low rank. It was unknown if it had advanced to a middle-rank demon. Roy finally understood why he had only obtained soul fragments after killing those spider demons. The reason was simple. Those spider demons could only be regarded as clones of the spider queen in front of him. The reason why they lived in clusters was not because of their biological habits but because they were simply tools for the spider queen. The spider queen sensed it when those soul fragments started disappearing during Roy's hunt, so she found Roy through them and came to kill him. Intelligence is a good thing. Editor, Atlas Studios. Logically speaking, Roy's first instinct facing a sudden plot change with a hidden boss should have been to run away. But he did not know why the first thought that popped into his head when he looked at that hideous spider queen was, "FCK, I'll swallow my dung and commit suicide if my future wife looks like this." When he thought of how he could become a bachelor demon for life because he could not accept their aesthetics, Roy felt a deep sorrow within. Then he turned around and ran. It was impossible for him not to run. He knew that he could not deal with this spider queen just by looking at her size, and he would really be stuck if those spider demons besieged him. "You are too treacherous. Why would you, an adult demon, come to be neighbors with me, a young demon, and still use clones?" When she saw Roy running away, the spider queen did not become angry but instead burst out in ridiculing laughter. This was exactly what she wanted. As a demon that had hunted thousands of prey, she knew how to make the souls of her prey more delicious. Terror, fear, pain. If the prey could maintain these emotions, the quality and taste of the soul might even improve after it dies. This little demon in front of her was low rank without a doubt. Although he looked a little strange, and she was unable to tell which bloodlines he had, the Spider Queen did not mind at all. In fact, at least 30% of all her prey were little demons like this. Unlike those inferior monsters, these intelligent little demons were by far the easiest to produce high-quality souls. Just put pressure on them and let them feel terror and fear. Therefore, she was not in a hurry when she saw Roy running away. She stretched her limbs and took her time giving chase. Give up. You can't escape. How dare you steal from the great Arania? Your only outcome is to become food in my stomach. I'll bite off your tail, rip off your head, and tear your body into pieces. You will wail in pain and beg me to kill you as soon as possible. While chasing Roy, Arania yelled in a strange accent with the demon language, portraying the explicit miserable death that Roy would face when he died in a bid to increase the fear in Roy's heart. Arania continued advancing while spelling out these horrible endings, constantly using her tank-like body to knock down the trees along the way, creating an unmatched momentum. She was chasing and teasing Roy like a cat would a mouse, and even the spider demons that gathered under her command did not completely block his route. Instead, they were like hounds, driving this prey that was Roy around. However, she did not know that Roy was not as terrified as she thought. The success of the first part of his body modification plan did not inflate his ego. He knew that a tail was not going to make him invincible, so when he was planning to clear out the spider demons, he had given some thought about what to do if he was under siege. Nonetheless, he had not expected the existence of a hidden boss like the Spider Queen. Therefore, Roy immediately started to execute his plans when the unexpected enemy that was Arania appeared. He started running along the route that he came from, shuttling in between the gaps of the spiderwebs. These spiderwebs had lost the spider demons that were guarding them, so there was no problem as long as he did not get stuck on them. Arania's slow chase elated Roy. Of course, he could feel that it was the other party's way of toying with him, but that made him even happier. After passing the territory of the spider demons and their spiderwebs, Roy no longer needed to dodge while running. He aimed directly for the southwest direction and ran with all his might. Spider Queen Arania had yet to find anything wrong, thinking that this little demon was merely fleeing in panic. However, Arania realized something was wrong once they were out of the woods. This little demon seems to be heading in the direction of the lava river. That's right, the place Roy chose to escape to was in the direction of the lava river. He had seen the river when he first entered the underground world from his hatching place, so it was a given that he could remember it. There were many dangers along the route from his cave to the river, but he was being hunted right now and could not give it much thought. Arania immediately became angry when she became aware of Roy's intentions. She did not know what Roy could do by fleeing to the lava river. The reason why she was angry was that she realized that Roy was not as afraid as she thought he would be. This feeling sucked. Her expectations fell short. Surround and kill him. In anger, Arania decided not to continue with her game. Her soul fragments were still on him. Arania would really regret to her death if he were to escape. When they received the order, the spider demons immediately accelerated and started to surround Roy from behind. Roy discovered that the spiders were approaching him and launching themselves at him, so he used his tail to whip them back. That steel-like tail caused them serious injuries when it knocked into them, and it was difficult for the spiders to get close for the time being. After all, it was no longer their territory, and without their spiderwebs, the spider demons did not have a good way to stop Roy. Roy changed direction continuously as well. The spider demons had no problems moving forward and backward with their 8 legs, but they were not that good with lateral movement. They were spiders, not crabs. Arania also realized that it was a big mistake not to surround this little demon with her spiders when she could. But it was slightly difficult for them to give chase now, so she went into battle herself. Now that there were no trees blocking like in the forest, Arania could increase her speed and move her limbs. She even crushed a few spider demons that were blocking her way and caught up from behind. Die, damn you, Arania growled at Roy. However, Roy responded to her with a bullet. During the chase, Roy twisted his body and fired at Arania. Her huge body made an easy target for Roy, and as a result, the shot hit Arania directly in her stomach. The bullet failed to penetrate her body, but it made her abdomen shrink and her footsteps pause. Pain, that damn little demon seems to have shot something that really hurt me. Arania roared angrily and accelerated again, but right after she started moving again, 2 loud bangs came. Her body was shot again. Roy delayed Arania in this way, and he finally saw that lava river a while later. He turned back and shot all the bullets in his gun before he began running along the riverbank. Haha, despicable little bug. Do you want to jump into the river? Arania could not help laughing when she saw this scene. Even a demon will find it difficult to survive in such lava. You'll only die unless you have the bloodline of a flame demon. Tisk, what a chatterbox. Roy looked at Arania with contempt for a moment before his eyes lit up. Magma flowed in this lava river, but magma was actually melted rocks, so there would be some rocks that did not fully melt or cool down in the river. These rocks were not fixed to the ground and often flowed along with the magma. And now, Roy saw such a piece before his eyes. After calculating the distance, Roy suddenly changed his direction, stomped on the shore, and jumped directly onto that floating rock. Roy landed on the rock with ease. The rock sank a little under the weight, but under Roy's nervous glance, this rock did not submerge into the magma and rose slowly instead. After chasing him to the riverbank and seeing this scene, Arania was dumbfounded. Damn it, how is this little demon so clever? Newborn Demon Wings. Editor, Atlas Studios. Of course, it was impossible for Roy to jump into the magma. However, he did not intend to bathe in it from the beginning. He was merely a newborn little demon, and he certainly could not match up with a demon like Arania. However, he had his advantages as well, his small body and light weight. As a result, he left Arania dumbfounded when he jumped onto the rock. Would she dare to continue chasing onto the rock with her tank-sized body? That was no different from suicide. Arania stomped her spider legs angrily on the ground as she watched Roy flow steadily downstream atop the rock. She really could not figure out if this little demon was lucky or if he planned this method of escape from the beginning. If it was the latter, then this little demon was a little scary. He was not born that long ago, yet he was as cunning as an old demon. How could a demon with such intellect be only a low-rank demon? No, my soul fragments are still in his hands. He'll definitely eat them if I let him go like this, causing huge damage to my soul. Seeing her clones catch up, Arania gritted her teeth and directed them to the shore. Jump, everyone jump. Arania did not dare to jump herself, but the much smaller spider demons could. However, if they were to perish in the magma, Arania similarly would not be able to recover her soul fragments on them. However, she was now blinded by rage. She could not imagine that she actually ate a loss at the hands of a little demon. She wanted to kill Roy even if it meant losing her soul fragments. However, would Roy not think of things that she could think of? This rock floating on the magma was not too big, only able to hold Roy and without other space on it. In such a situation, there was only one place the spider demons could land, so Roy waved his tail and hit them away, making them fall into the magma. In the end, after just a few were flung in such a manner, Arania did not dare to get the demon spiders to throw themselves at him again. She was not dumb and could see how suicidal this action was. Despicable little bug. Helpless, Arania began attacking verbally. But her vocabulary was clearly lacking, so she repeatedly called Roy this name. How long can you hide? You won't be able to come ashore as long as I follow you, and then you will be carried by the lava river into the lower levels of the abyss. There, you will encounter even more powerful demons. They can all easily crush you with a finger. Roy was stunned. There are indeed lower levels in this world. And it sounds like the indigenous demons call this underground world the abyss. Is the end of this lava river flowing deeper into it? Of course, Roy could not just continue flowing like this. But after saying this, Arania followed Roy along the riverbank. Roy turned his head and saw that the riverbank was still rather far away. This lava river was much wider than he estimated with his eyes. It was at least 4 to 5 meters away from the opposite riverbank and impossible for him to jump over. Although he wanted to use this rock as a boat, Roy could not find anything that he could use as a paddle. Moreover, an ordinary paddle would probably instantly melt in this lava. Therefore, Roy looked like he was trapped. Arania scoffed when she saw Roy's hesitation. However, before she finished laughing, she saw Roy patting the back of his head and then using his claw to gesture in the air. What is this damn little bug doing? Arania was baffled. How could I forget that I have a lot of soul fragments? Roy thought while sitting on the rock. He summoned the system interface and saw that he had actually obtained about 50 soul fragments. If these soul fragments originate from Arania's soul, perhaps they can be used. If they can be used, then I might get out of trouble. With this thought, Roy immediately began to draw. This time, Roy drew a pair of wings, a pair of demon wings. If he could not jump or swim over, then he could only fly over. Thus, Roy's first thought was to make a pair of wings for himself. However, he had no idea if the soul fragments he possessed were enough, so he did not dare to make the wings too big or set any complicated definitions. He had only one definition for the demon wings: flight. But when he tried to materialize it, Roy found that it would not work. There were not enough souls. It could only complete up to 80%, even though it was the same material as his body's. Roy had a headache. He also discovered that the system would not display the specific value for each soul. Similarly, there was no clear indication of how many souls it needed for each defined attribute, and it would only show the completion percentage when he was about to save, which required Roy to estimate the number required. Roy guessed that the flight attribute might require some strength in the wings itself. After all, it was necessary to offset his own weight to be able to fly, and it was impossible for a pair of wings without strength. This was probably why the wings could not materialize. Roy gave it some thought and changed the defined attribute to glide. It was immediately successful. This gave Roy the feeling of being like in a wingsuit. Humans might not be able to make it flap and fly, but they could spread the suit and glide with the wind. Roy was still 4 to 5 meters away from the other side of the river. As long as his control was good, it was not impossible for him to cross the river by gliding. Since that's settled, let's materialize it. On the shore, Arania was still wondering what Roy was doing, but right at that moment, she felt a great pain coming from her soul. The severe pain coming directly from the soul was indescribable. Arania's entire body was trembling, and terrible cries came from her mouth. The connection between the soul fragments and her main soul was suddenly severed, making her understand that Roy was devouring her soul fragments. The strange thing was that she did not even see Roy taking out her soul fragments to devour them. Just how did he do it? Arania's huge body was now lying on the ground. She raised her head reluctantly to look at Roy on the rock and found his body trembling as well. However, his trembling was different because Arania could see very clearly that 2 bumps suddenly arched out from Roy's back. The 2 bumps broke out of their wall while Roy trembled. The next moment, a pair of dark red demon wings appeared. Arania was shocked by this scene. Demon wings. Real demon wings. Could this damn little bug actually have the bloodline of a high-rank demon? Impossible. If he really has the bloodline of a high-rank demon, why would he appear in the upper level of the abyss? Arania's doubt was normal. In the abyss of the demon world, bloodline was the most essential condition for evaluating demons. The low-rank demons usually had mixed bloodlines, and such demons were usually born from an egg. They would not even have the concept of parents. The male low-rank demons did not care at all, while the female low-rank demons would directly send their eggs to the upper world after laying them, putting them in the demon sea to allow the seawater to push these eggs to places where they could hatch all over. Such places were islands where volcanoes exist, and the hot volcanic rock bed would incubate and hatch the eggs. Almost all of the low-rank demons were born this way. However, it was different for the middle-rank and high-rank demons whose bloodline was purer. Although some of the middle-rank demons might be hatched from eggs, quite a number of them had live births. All of the high-rank demons had live births, and this method of giving birth also led to a scarcity of high-rank demons. As a result, the high-rank demons placed importance on their offspring and educated them from birth. The indication of purity of bloodline depended on whether or not the demon possessed demon wings. Unlike the elytra wings of insect demons, Roy's wings had now transformed into the form of real demon wings. It was no wonder that Arania would be puzzled. After all, the pure-blooded demons who possessed demon wings were extremely rare in the upper level of the abyss. In Arania's shocked eyes, Roy tried to flap his wings. The wings looked small, and the wingspan was not large enough, but he was able to control it freely. Roy faced the other side of the river and squatted on the rock to start accumulating power. He concentrated all his strength on his legs and even bent his tail against the rock. After he finished accumulating power, Roy slammed his legs and tail with great force and bounced up from where he was. The jump brought him high up into the sky. Roy fully extended his demon wings while thinking of rushing to the other side of the river. At this moment, the hot current from the lava river gave him a lot of buoyancy, allowing him to glide smoothly toward the other side of the river. However, Roy kept descending because he was gliding. Finally, he used his claws to grip the cliff at the other side over the river and landed his feet firmly on it, plastering his body against the cliff. It could not count as a perfect landing, but Roy was overjoyed, finding himself out of danger. Roy turned around, waved at Arania across the river, and then tried to say his first few words with the demon language. Fair. Well, yes, it doesn't seem too difficult to learn the mother tongue of the demon race. Roy gathered his wings behind him and left under Arania's stunned gaze. Where was the magic? Editor. Atlas Studios. Roy walked backward. He had to guard against the possibility of Arania jumping across the river. However, he later realized that he was thinking too much. Arania was now in unbearable pain and had no strength to pursue Roy. She could only watch him leave while hissing angrily at him. Demons were experts at playing with souls. The more they played with them, the more they understood them. They could use certain means to separate a portion of their soul without damaging their main soul. Soul fragments were created in this way. These soul fragments could live on inside living creatures like parasites, and since the soul fragments had the demon's aura, they could naturally turn ordinary creatures into monsters. The demons usually used these monsters with the soul fragments to help them capture prey or to fight. All of their perceptions would be sent back to the demon. The more soul fragments they separated out meant that there were more nodes and stronger perception. This was a special, soul network. In this sense, demons were also creatures who liked to surf the internet. In addition to being stored in living bodies, the soul fragments could also be stored in certain items. These items were generally called demon creations or demon items, and these items often had some very special functions. However, the separation of soul fragments was not without side effects. Once these soul fragments were swallowed or purified by others, it would cause severe damage to the main soul. It was also possible to obtain the true name of the demon from the soul fragments through special means. Any damage to the soul might cause the collapse of a demon's mental state, their magic energy to dissipate, and so on, causing the demon's strength to drop significantly. Roy used up about 50 of Arania's soul fragments to materialize his demon wings. This was a severe injury to her. It was already a feat for Arania not to go crazy on the spot, so how could she still possess the energy to jump across the river to kill him? He was now the biggest enemy to Arania. Of course, Roy had yet to understand much of the demon world, so he did not understand the gravity of what he did. After leaving the riverbank, he was still feeling a little depressed. What happened to driving out the bad neighbor? Why am I the one being driven away instead? It was truly, completely unexpected. Murphy of Murphy's Law is still with me in spirit after transmigration. I definitely can't return to my cave for the time being. At least not before I find a way to kill Arania. Unfortunately, a cave like that was quite difficult to find. Fortunately, Roy had already made up his mind to explore the underground world leisurely. His schedule was only moved ahead now, so he was not depressed for too long. As such, Roy chose a direction and started moving forward. He began his hunt for prey. After being hunted down by Spider Queen Arania, Roy realized that there could be all kinds of accidents in this unknown world. If he was not careful enough and smart enough, he might lose his life. Therefore, the best way was to store some souls as a reserve so that he had room to navigate during emergencies. Thus, while traveling, Roy hunted down the monsters he could win against and obtained their souls. A month passed by in this way, and Roy could make some conclusions about certain things. Perhaps it was as what Arania had said. The more powerful demons stayed in the lower levels of the abyss, while those on the upper level were basically all low-rank demons. Fighting and hunting were the mainstay of this world. Demons hunted monsters and also their own kind. Similarly, monsters not only hunted their own kind, but they also hunted demons. This was because there was a possibility for monsters to turn into demons. Monsters could accumulate demonic aura through devouring demons, and they could transform into demons themselves once they had enough demonic aura. This also explained why the low-rank demons had such strange shapes and complicated bloodlines. It was precisely because of this rule that some fierce and powerful monsters loved to hunt little demons like Roy. Roy saw a little demon about his size being caught by a huge bird-shaped monster swooping down from the sky. It was then gobbled up by the monster head first and even struggled as it moved along the monster's throat. This scene made Roy's heart turn cold. It also made him understand that if he did not mature quickly, he might be eaten like this one day. The pressure and urgency of survival made Roy realize that he was becoming more and more cold-blooded in his hunts. He did not even flinch when killing his kind now. Roy could not kill the monsters and demons that were too powerful, but Roy could now kill opponents at the same rank as him with ease because of his special tail. Regardless of whether it was a sneak attack or an open attack, the tail's killing efficiency greatly benefited Roy. The first thing Roy did after acquiring enough souls was to modify his demon wings. He increased the size of its wingspan, and the demon wings now had a wingspan of 2 meters after extending. After finding that its carrying capacity was sufficient, Roy also changed the attribute of glide to flight. Now, he could finally take off by flapping his wings and fly freely in the air. The only thing that was lacking was his speed. Therefore, Roy had already thought of the next part of his modification plan for the demon wings, adding the attribute of high-speed flight. After being able to fly, Roy's hunting range became much larger, and he could now fight the flying monsters and demons. As time passed, Roy's range of exploration also continued to expand. However, he had actually only reached about 100 kilometers away from the cave he had lived in. During this period, his experience with hunting made him discover something that puzzled him. He realized that all creatures living in the upper level of the abyss, be it monsters or demons, basically used only their bodies to fight. Although some used venoms or acids, these methods were only products of their own bodies. There were only 2 conditions to judge the strength of these demons and monsters. One was their body type, and the other was the size of their muscles. This sort of physical fighting method seemed very exciting, but it also puzzled Roy to no end. What about magic? Why are there no demons fighting with magic? T-Virus Transformation. Adult Period. Editor. Atlas Studios. During this period, Roy had been thinking that he would have died in the lava river if Spider Queen Arania had shot a shadow arrow or a spiderweb at him while he was on the rock. However, Arania did not use such magic. It was not just her. Roy had not met any demon throughout his journey that used magic in the truest sense of the word. He would have thought that there was no magic in this world if it was not because he could clearly see a magic energy stat as an attribute. Now came the question. Roy had magic energy as an attribute since he was born, so that meant that the other demons should as well. However, why was it that none of them used magic? Could a demon who did not know magic be considered a demon at all? Roy observed for a long time before he made his guesses. His first guess was that the magic energy reserve of low-rank demons was too low to meet the conditions to use magic. His second guess was that the power of magic released was too weak and not as efficient as physical attacks, which was why low-rank demons did not like to use it. His last guess was that the demons on the upper level of the abyss had magic energy, but because of the lack of inheritance of magic knowledge, they did not know how to use magic at all. Simply put, they were uneducated and uncivilized. In fact, after giving it some thought, the third guess was probably the case. The upper level of the abyss was chaotic and had fighting all day long. It was basically another version of human slums. Even if there was a demon language, he had not even seen a demon that was literate. It was no wonder there was not any inheritance of knowledge. Perhaps he could only head to the lower levels of this abyss to obtain the knowledge of magic after becoming strong enough in this upper level. If that were the case, it would explain why there were not any high-rank demons on this level. The high-rank demons were elites and were not going to live in slums with these peasants. Roy felt refreshed, feeling like he stumbled upon the truth. If it was really what he guessed, did that mean that he could create a magic skill? This was not impossible. Roy was an anomaly among the demons after all. He could use the customization system to modify himself, so he did not need to follow the usual route of demon evolution. The ability to use magic in the upper level of the abyss where most of the other demons did not know how to use magic was an advantage that required no explanation. Roy had a feeling of superiority originating from human intellect over these low-rank demons with muscles in their heads. He basked in the joy of crushing them not only with his intellect but also with his strength. Just do it, it was time to make a wave. No matter how sure the plan looked, his priority was to ensure the supply of souls. The first thing that Roy thought of was the T-Virus. He had drawn the material, so he would definitely use it. Roy estimated that he would need 100 or so, complete low-quality, souls to materialize it. Not only could the T-Virus greatly increase his physical strength, but it would also increase the possibility of giving him a superpower like psychokinesis. Roy's original definition of T-Virus was perfect infusion after all. Although psychokinesis probably could not be considered magic, Roy was not that demanding. He was satisfied as long as it served its purpose. Next, Roy entered hardcore mode and launched a massacre. All the demons and monsters weaker than Roy faced tough luck since he killed to hunt souls, not just for food. Sneak attacks, ambushes, traps, Roy did everything he could to harvest souls. In fact, many demons were cunning, but that generally referred to the monsters that had survived for a long time in the upper level of the abyss, or those that had reached maturity and formed their wisdom during their hunting experiences. However, the weaker demons and monsters that had not survived that long had yet to gather enough experience, and they were direct in their approach to combat, fight the opponent head-on and be done with it. Therefore, this was the most vulnerable phase for demons and monsters. Those that could get through it would gradually smarten up, while death awaited those that could not. This was why Arania was surprised by Roy's cleverness. In her impression, a little demon like Roy was in his vulnerable phase, so how was it possible for him to be so cunning? And now, Roy was specifically catching demons and monsters at this phase. He was even kill-stealing from the other weaker demons and monsters. How could they possibly do anything about it? It took Roy about 4 days to collect 120 low-quality souls. Their sizes were different since they came from demons and monsters. After gauging that he had enough souls, Roy found a safe place and eagerly started on his T-virus modification plan. He opened his system interface and watched as the accumulated souls continued to disappear. In the end, Roy finally had the syringe gun in his hand. It took him 114 souls to exchange for the T-virus, by far the most souls he had used thus far. However, he hesitated now that he finally had the syringe gun. He could not help it. It was a virus. It took courage to inject yourself with a virus. What if the system had problems? Nonetheless, after pondering over it for a while, Roy decided to believe in the system. He pressed the syringe gun on his arm and pushed the pump, injecting himself with the potion. After injecting himself, Roy threw the syringe gun carelessly. He sat cross-legged on the ground and started waiting quietly. Not too long after, a strong burning sensation appeared from within his body and quickly spread throughout his torso, limbs, tail, and even his brain. All of them felt as though they were on fire. This burning sensation quickly turned into unbearable pain. Roy roared with pain. All the cells in his entire body were frantically proliferating at the moment. His muscles, internal organs, and bones were expanding at a crazy speed, and his blood flowed around his body at a crazy speed. The pain caused by his rapidly growing body made him crazy, and his hands could not help scratching all over his body, causing his skin to bleed out. After what seemed like an eternity, the pain gradually began to alleviate. Roy slowly recovered and checked his physical condition. It was not until this time that Roy realized he seemed to have grown out of the little demon category. The rapid expansion of his body caused him to grow to about 2 meters tall, almost double his previous height. His arms, legs, tail, and the muscles all over his body bulged. His demon wings also benefited once again. It became wider and stronger, and its wingspan increased to more than 3 meters. Stretching his hand to touch his head, Roy found his demon horns grew as well. They were directly protruding out from his skull and had a curve to them. His palms grew larger, and the nails on them became longer, sharper, and began to flash a cold light. A gentle stroke on a rock caused a scratch on it. Even without the modification by the system, these claws seem to be as hard as steel. Does that mean that I can obtain the adamantium attribute next time? His tail became thicker and longer as well. Roy could feel his strength just by standing there now. Even Roy did not expect such a huge change could happen with a tube of the T-virus. It felt as though he directly matured into an adult. The 100-odd souls were truly worth it. As he looked at the system interface, Roy found his attributes had increased dramatically. Name, Roy. Race, demon. Bloodline, at least 4 different kinds. Demon name, Bakrontia Marier Lictoren Stanless Lundisha, Ramos Osiris. Form, adult. Hierarchy, top of the low rank. Attribute, dark. Strength, 66. Speed, 35. Magic energy, 9. Activity, 74. Loaded materials, T-virus, alien blade tail, demon wings. Skills, psychokinesis strengthened by virus. Evaluation, you seem to be resuscitated. Roy was amazed at the changes in his attributes. The T-virus brought him a 50-point increase in strength. The increase in his speed was about 20 points, and activity had increased the most with at least 60 points. No wonder no traces could be seen from the skin he had scratched. It had healed itself with his strong vitality. Moreover, his evaluation seemed to have skipped the middle-low rank entirely. His premature state was gone as well. He managed to patch it up. However, what delighted Roy the most was the appearance of psychokinesis in his skills section. Although he might have thought that it was possible to obtain superpowers before, it still made Roy feel incredible when it really appeared. He could not wait to try it out. He stretched his hand out and curled his finger, visible through the sharp nail. A fist-sized rock floated up under his command and flew to where Roy's fingers pointed. This wonderful remote control technique was quite fun for Roy. However, Roy felt pain grapple his brain after a while. The stone dropped onto the ground with the loss of his concentration. Shit, Roy just noticed that his magic energy was now empty. Does magic energy have to be consumed to activate psychokinesis? Moreover, it seems like my magic energy attribute didn't increase through the T-virus. Roy was shocked. How on earth am I supposed to increase my magic energy?